As a kid, I grew up in northern Indiana. Because my parents moved around so often, I went to 8 different schools before college. Every other year, I was forced to meet new friends and develop new relationships. But after about a decade in the business world, experience taught me that surviving as a new kid and thriving in the business world were really pretty similar. The key to both was establishing good quality relationships. And that's really the heart of Lighthouse leadership. It's your relationships, not only with your wife, but also with your kids if you have them, with your friends, with your family, and also with the people that you work with. And by the time you leave this session, you'll have a good overview of the Lighthouse leadership principle. Before we begin, though, I want to ask you 3 questions. Number one, how many lighthouses are there in the world today? How many do you think there are in the U.S.? And which state has the most lighthouses? The number of lighthouses in the world are 18,500, of which there are 1,000 in the United States. And the state with the most is Michigan with 150. And because lighthouses must be built to withstand harsh weather conditions like piercing rain, violent storms, and sometimes hurricanes, they have to be built on a rock-solid foundation. Of the 18,500 lighthouses in the world, how many do you think are exactly alike in size, shape, color, beacon pattern, and foghorn pattern? If you guess 0, that's correct. Sea captains call that the unique character of the lighthouse. And before any lighthouse was ever built, the architect had to understand the weather conditions it would face and how far out the beacon needed to travel to attract the attention of the sea captains. In other words, the architect had to understand the purpose of the lighthouse. And before lighthouses were totally automated, the lighthouse keeper had a number of daily tasks to perform to keep it running smoothly, one of which was to remove the dirt, the salt water, and other impurities that would hamper the beacon from shining out into the dark night. And when the glass was clear, it was able to attract the attention of the sea captains. And then and only then could the lighthouse do what it was made to do, and that's guide ships into the harbor. So that's the overview of the lighthouse leadership principle. And what we're going to do is we're going to use these 5 principles to draw your wife in and to guide her in a way that she's never been guided before. And we're going to use this tool as something that's going to transform your marriage forever. So I had a mentor who told me that every adult you and I know is experiencing stress in one of 5 main areas of our lives. It's either our job, our money, our marriage, our health, or our family. And he said, in order for you and I and everybody that we know, every adult that we know, to survive these 5 main storms of life, we also have to be built on a rock-solid foundation, and those are our relationships. And what I want you to do is I want you to think of your top 5 most important personal relationships. Now, it may sound kind of weird to think about that, but obviously your wife is one of your top relationships. If you're a man of faith, God might be one of your top relationships. If you have kids, they might be included in your top 5 most important personal relationships. But what I want you to do is I want you to think about who those people are and get out a piece of paper and write down the top 5 most important personal relationships that you have. So go ahead and list them out there. And if you're a man of faith, it might be God first, then your wife, then your kids. But you get to decide who your top 5 most important personal relationships are. Go ahead and write them down right now. Next, what I want you to do is I want you to score them on a scale from 1 to 5. We're going to measure the strength of your relationships on a scale of 1 to 5. 5 is the best. A 0 or a 1 is the worst. And this is not scientific, but I want you to use your gut. And I want you to think about where things are right now. So like a snapshot. So for instance, a number 5, a score of 5 would be no trust issues, no disagreements between you, no unresolved issues. You really get each other. You can almost finish each other's sentences. If you think back to when you and your wife first started dating, it may have been a solid 5 at that time. You know, you would over communicate, you really got each other. So that would be like an example of a 5 or a 4. A 0 or a 1 might be major trust issues. You're frustrated with them a lot, lots of unresolved issues. Maybe you just don't like the person. Could be that they've hurt you or you've hurt them, and there's just something in the way of a good solid relationship. And then, a 2, 3, and 4 is kind of in the middle. So just it's like it's a gut score. So what I want you to do is I want you to score each of those relationships like that. Okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to add these scores up. So you can see on the screen a 2, a 1, a 3, a 3, and a 4. You add that up and that's a 13. Next, I want you to think about your top 5 most important work relationships. And you might be thinking, well, what does that have to do with my marriage? Just trust the process. You'll see how this all comes together in a little bit. So think about your top 5 most important work relationships. If you own your own business, it might be a business partner or your assistant. If you work for somebody, it might be your boss. It may be a client. It may be key people in your business. What I want you to do is think of those top 5 most important work relationships for you to have a good year this year and next year. Who are the top 5 people that you must build relationships with in order for that to go well? And what I want you to do is list them out there as well, just like we did the personal. And once you have those listed, score them on a scale of 1 to 5 as well. So a 5 is the best, a 0 or 1 is the worst. And again, the same thing applies. A 5 would be somebody that you really get along with. You guys totally get each other. Very few misunderstandings. And if you do have a misunderstanding, it gets cleared up right away. You see eye to eye. You think very similarly maybe, but no unresolved issues, no trust issues. And then again, a 0 or a 1 may be the same thing that we scored on the personal, where you might have trust issues, frustration, you may not like the person, unresolved issues, so on and so forth. So go ahead, score each of those work relationships, and then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add that up. So you have a score for your personal and you have a score for your work relationships. Okay, the next thing I want you to do is I want you to add those two together, the personal score, the work score, and you're going to get a total score there. And then what I want you to do is double that, and that equals your total score for your rock solid foundation of relationships. So what does this mean? Well, you can remember back when we were in school, the grading scale may have been 90s is an A, 80s is a B, 70s is a C, 60s is a D. What this does is this gives you a snapshot of the strength of your rock solid foundation in your life. So for instance, if you scored 40s, 50s, 60s, you have somewhat of a weak rock solid foundation. So your ability to withstand the 5 storms of life, which is job, money, marriage, health, and storms in your family life, you might be on a weak ground right now, and we need to strengthen that up. And the more we strengthen that up, the stronger your foundation is going to be to help heal your marriage relationship. If you scored in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, that's better. And if there's room for improvement, we want to solidify that rock solid foundation of relationships at the same time that we're fixing your marriage relationship. And so I'm looking ahead. Once your marriage is fixed and we've saved your marriage and now you're going forward, as we strengthen this rock solid foundation, you're going to be able to withstand these major storms of life in a much, much better way. And another thing that's important about this is that 90% of our peace, our joy, and our fulfillment comes from our rock solid foundation of relationships. So what that means is if you don't feel a lot of peace right now, or a lot of joy, or a lot of fulfillment, and you scored low on your rock solid foundation of relationship, well, that's one of the main reasons. So as we strengthen and grow each of these top 10 relationships, your peace is you're going to get more peace. You're going to have more joy. You're going to have more fulfillment. And that's going to help propel you and strengthen your marriage relationship as well. So just trust the process. So now as you're looking at these top 10 personal relationships, you may be wondering, okay, well, great. Well, what does that mean? Well, I want to show you a formula to grow any of these relationships. And so as we grow each of these relationships, even if we take one and we grow it, it grows your rock solid foundation relationship. So there's a 3-step formula to grow any relationship. And I know that we're doing some special things in your marriage relationship, and we're focusing on that. This is also the formula to grow your relationship, your marriage relationship, your relationship with your kids, relationship with work people. It's a very simple process, but it's difficult to do. So, number one, plan time. Two, spend time. And number three, be present. Plan time, spend time, and be present. So, for example, we raised three girls, and when they were younger, I would take them to breakfast once a week, and I would plan the time. Kaylee was Wednesday, Ellie was Thursday, Kylie was Friday. And every week I'd take them to the cafe and we would have breakfast and we would sit and talk and laugh and have fun together. So we planned time every week. We called it one-on-one time. And we did that every week for years. And so what would happen if I didn't plan that time and we didn't have intentional time? Well, yes, I was home in the evenings and on the weekends. We had that time together as a family, and there were 5 of us. But I think to grow any relationship, we need that one-on-one time together, whether it's on the phone, whether it's in person, and we just need to spend time together. So the step 2 was to spend the time. So what would happen if I planned the time each week with my daughters and then I didn't follow through and actually spend the time with them? Like maybe a work commitment got in the way, or I was too tired and couldn't get up. That would ruin my relationship with my girls because I didn't follow through. So not only do we have to plan time, we also have to follow through and actually spend the time. And the third thing is we need to be present in the conversation. So we would go to the cafe, we would talk, we would laugh, there were lots of eye contact. I wasn't thinking about what I had to do after that meeting. I wasn't worried about what happened before. I was focused and present in the conversation with my daughters. So the same thing for you. To grow any of these relationships that we just talked about, we need to plan time, regular time together, spend time, we need to follow through, and then we need to be present. So what would happen if I was on my phone the whole time, or I took a phone call in the middle of our time with my daughters? That would make them feel less of a priority. So the same thing with your wife, the same thing with your kids. If you're a man of faith, even your relationship with God, you've got to plan regular time for quiet time, to read the Bible, to watch sermons. You need to follow through and spend the time, and then you need to be present. You need to be focused on the conversation. So does that make sense? So what we talked about is really the 5 secrets to growing and guiding any relationship: the rock solid foundation, the unique character. We have to know our purpose, we have to attract, and then we have to guide our people. So the coming weeks, we're going to go into more detail in each of those things, but this is really the foundation of drawing your wife in and leading her and guiding her in a way that she's never been guided before. And as we do this, we're going to draw them in, and they're just going to love the leadership, and this is going to transform your marriage in ways that you may not have anticipated. So just get ready. It's going to be a really cool ride from here.